Okay, let's start with the second panel of this session dedicated to Arctic policies. We will now move to Iceland and the three countries of the Kingdom of Denmark. So we have with us Friðrik Jónsson, senior Arctic official of Iceland, Mira Kleist, who speaks for the Greenlandic Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Energy, Margretha Jacobsen, representative for Faroe Islands to the Arctic Council, and the ambassador Thomas Winkler of the Kingdom of Denmark. And in this panel, I wanted to do it so that because Iceland is now holding the Arctic Council chairmanship, and as we heard in the last two previous panels, managing very capably to deal with the COVID pandemic crisis. I wanted to first ask Mr. Jónsson for some maybe a couple of words about how is it going with the chairmanship implementation. But before we started the panel, again, I'm requested to do this housekeeping information as we have new members of audience coming in. So just for the members of audience who haven't been there in our previous panels, you are able to ask the questions to the panelists via questions and answer function in the Cisco Web Events window that's on the right-hand low corner of the screen, or you can send your questions to the AFS-QA at polarfoundation.org. All this information is on the Arctic Future Symposium website under practical info. And let's go back to the panel. And Mr. Jónsson, the floor is yours. And you can take more time because you're talking about your chairmanship implementation.
All right. Also, thank you, Adam, and glad to be here. And just a little note. I'm using an electronic background picture of my ministry, which is lit up in bright orange, as you see, and that is in recognition of the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence campaign. And so just to give that explanation. Thanks a little bit to our chairmanship program, where gender issues are a part. Now, how's it going with our chairmanship? Well, we're three quarters of the way through our period of the chairmanship. 18 months down, 6 months still to go. So far, so good. We think it's been a resounding success, of course. But obviously, there have been a few challenges along the way because of a little something we are all too keenly aware of. Now, the headline of our chairmanship is together towards a sustainable Arctic. So sustainability is really the key theme in our chairmanship, and it used to be that the environmental ecological aspect of sustainability was always at the forefront in the Arctic Council work, but we see all three pillars now are environmental protection, economic development, and social well-being. This is all now very much part of the Arctic Council's work, and that's also reflected in the Icelandic chairmanship program. The priority areas that we have are four. One is the Arctic marine environment, where we've been focusing on several particular projects, one being on plastics in the ocean. That's a lot of the plastics that find their way to the ocean somehow manage to find their way up north into the Arctic, so they are a perpetual challenge. We've also been focusing on other issues, related to the blue bioeconomy, and that relates to what has already been discussed in the previous panels, is that we need to find this balance between protection and production. I think was the way the Norwegian foreign minister put it earlier. That is, we need to balance our ecology with economy and do it in a sustainable and manageable fashion. Second point or second priority is the climate and green energy solutions. We've been working on soot methane pollution, black carbon, and working both within the council, but also on in other areas such as the IMO. Implementation of the Polar Code, responsible shipping, etc. But also we've been promoting and working on bringing renewables or renewable energy solutions to the Arctic and to Arctic communities. We of course have a good experience ourselves with hydroelectric and geothermal energy in Iceland, and we love to share our experiences with others, and if they can utilize some of what we've been able to do. But there are degrees of what you can do as well. If you move from heavy fuel oils to lighter fuels, that is also progress, even though you're still doing using carbon-based energy solutions. But I think we could all agree, heavy dirty diesel fuel is, compared to natural gas, that natural gas, even though it's still carbon fuel, is preferable to a dirty heavy fuel. So this is what we're working on with our partners in the other countries and with energy agencies, etc. Now we also have the third priority is the people in the Arctic. Societal issues, health, gender, general welfare issues, suicide preventions, etc., etc. And then the fourth priority is stronger Arctic Council, and cooperation, coordination. And these partnerships, they don't just happen. They don't materialize out of thin air. They need constant work, and they need to be nurtured. And this is what we're doing with our good colleagues across all the 8 member states, and also with our permanent participant partners. And so far so good. Although COVID has presented some unique challenges, one of the benefits of the Arctic Council's work is that people are used to working together in adverse conditions, using clever tools for cooperation and collaboration. So even if you can't make it across and travel by traditional means, you still find ways to cooperate. So that's been actually one of the positives we've seen in our work, that the good work of the Council has managed to continue through our working groups, and indeed we were able to benefit from that in preparations, for example, of our last couple of senior Arctic official meetings back in now earlier this month, and also back in June, in terms of gathering information and sharing experience and how the communities and countries of the Arctic were dealing with COVID-19. Since we have a good network, it was relatively straightforward to reach out to everyone to see how they were coping, how they were doing, and already start creating a little bit of a lessons identified or lessons learned going forward. Yes, so we also held this fall. We had something called the SouthBased Marine Mechanism to discuss specifically oceans-related issues. Instead of having a 3-day conference in Iceland in the spring, we had let's say a 5-day event spread over 5 weeks to make it more manageable and easier on everyone, because even though these online meetings are great, they can be a bit of a challenge as well. And I think we will be benefiting from that work going forward. And now, as we go into the remaining 6 months, we still have the conference on plastics coming up. We will be preparing for the handover to our Russian friends at the ministerial in May here in Reykjavik, and start working on a joint ministerial statement, etc. So that is sort of briefly on the chairmanship itself, and again, a wee bit of a challenge with COVID, but the good work progresses and goes forward. And I think it also speaks to the resilience of the Arctic Council itself, and how it is set up, that we've been able to weather this storm so far. That doesn't mean that we don't have some potentially existential questions coming up in the near future for us. It has been discussed by the other panels as well. This increased attention to the Arctic may mean that we have to look at a little further at the Arctic Council itself, what it does, how it does it, and how it is set up and how it's structured. Not perhaps timely as of yet, but with the increased attention, with the increased workload, one may wonder whether an international forum such as the Council, as it is set up currently with a small secretariat, we the countries that are in the Council, we may need to look at whether we need to do more as demand for more action from us increases. Again, I just briefly mentioned, yes, the Russian chairmanship is as well coming up. They have given us a sneak preview of their plans, and that will be part of our program now going forward and preparing the handover takeover. And yes, when we're looking forward to having a productive sessions with our colleagues working on a ministerial statement for the Reykjavik Ministerial. Just to move briefly in terms of Arctic policies, has already been mentioned by the colleagues previously, that most of the countries are either working on or have finished recently concluded reviews of their Arctic policies. Iceland is working on its own Arctic policy review. Our current policy is from 2011. It's relatively brief. It's 12 points on 1.5 pages. That came from Parliament, and it's still the basis, and it provides a fairly good basis, but there is ambition now to bring in more detail and hopefully more ambition as well. The lead on on working on the Arctic policy for Iceland is with Parliament. So there is a cross-political committee basically working on this with participation of all the political parties, supported by a member of my team here at the Foreign Ministry, but the Parliament is in the lead on behalf of the Foreign Minister. So, and we're expecting that come spring we will see the rest of that work. It's important as we go forward. What we've seen in many of the Arctic policies is that they have been developing. They've been becoming bigger, longer, more detailed, and which again is a reflection of the increased level of importance and attention to the Arctic. And I expect the same here. We will be moving into a more detailed and hopefully more ambitious territory as well with our policy. And I expect to see the fruits of those labors in the spring. With that, I think we're off to a good start, but I'm open for questions. I'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So indeed, please, the request for the audience is that your questions will be forwarded to the panelists. So please do post them in the Q&A section of this WebEx panel. Okay, let's move now to the three countries of the Kingdom of Denmark, and we will start with Margretha Jacobsen from Faroe Islands. The floor is yours.
Hi there. Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again. Greetings to you all from the Faroe Islands, and good afternoon to fellow participants. Thank you for the invitation. The Arctic of today is remarkably different from the Arctic of 2011, when we last launched the joint strategy in cooperation with Denmark and Greenland, and the Faroe Strategic Assessment in 2013. Change is indeed a key word, and alarmingly rapid climate change the driver. Climate change is perhaps the strongest and most apparent signifier that marks the difference between then and now. As governments, we acknowledge a new and even stronger sense of urgency and commitment to act in a timely manner. And as regards the new aspects, We have in the last decade gotten a new international context of particular relevance to the Arctic. I'm referring to the Paris Agreement and the Agenda 2030, but also our new agreements we have entered as part of the Arctic Council. These are new instruments by which further progress may be made, and the upcoming UN agenda for the ocean in the coming decade is also an important point of reference going forward. This is a new foothold as we look at the challenges and opportunities from a different viewpoint than the one applied in 2011 and 13. Notably, the perspective of interdependence is now more apparent to all stakeholders, and it's clear to all that the approach must, to a much larger extent, be one of inclusion, as we should strive to break down the silos and collaborate across the various fields and sectors to come up with more sustainable solutions. As a nation in the Arctic region, the Faroe Islands have been an active player in Arctic cooperation for decades. And in 2013, the government commissioned a strategic assessment that aimed to pinpoint the particular interests of the Faroe Islands in the Arctic region. It looked broadly at challenges and opportunities from an overall ambition of economic development as an Arctic nation strategically placed in one of the most productive oceans of the world. Main priorities included regional and international cooperation, and with due attention to safeguarding the environment and particularly at securing the health of our oceans, and with a strong focus on research and safety and emergency response in our waters. We have worked to this end, but it's clear that the state of affairs leaves much to be desired. We have always given top priority to regional and international cooperation, and that is why we're also part in a joint strategy with Denmark and Greenland again. The joint strategy builds on 6 visions of overarching interest and primarily from the perspective of international cooperation on border transcending issues such as climate change and research and the environment, to name but a few. And I'll let my colleague Thomas to elaborate a bit further on that one. Most issues of relevance to the Faroe Islands in an Arctic context and in the joint strategy relate to areas for which the Faroe Islands have exclusive competence. And this is why this year the government of the Faroe Islands again decided to commission the work on a national strategy. It's early days and we're in the midst of hearing relevant stakeholders, and I can therefore only speak in very general terms of the emerging contours of a new strategy to be launched in the new year. We aim to revisit the overarching priorities of economic development, international cooperation, and the health of our oceans, where also scientific collaboration and research is key. And we will continue to provide for the capabilities, capacities to implement the agreements we have entered. And also with the overall view to contributing to the welfare of the people of the region, who in this new strategy also have moved closer to the center of our attention. We are resetting the objectives in the new international context. The Faroe Islands are experiencing a new momentum of interest to engage with the Faroe Islands as a nation in the Arctic. Discussions are on the way to develop partnership with the EU and the UK. And recently we cemented relations with the US in a new partnership. So we're widening the perspective and step up international cooperation on the basis of the new alliances forged. But we also narrow the scope to focus on our strongholds as a large ocean nation, dependent on the sustainable use of its resources. To name but a few themes, the blue bioeconomy is a new theme to consider, as is green energy. On a finishing note, one could say that our priorities have so far largely gone hand in hand with those of the Arctic Council, and rarely more than under the present chairmanship of Iceland, with a very ambitious program has taken a governance of the ocean agenda to the next level. It is indeed a strong testimony to the constructive work of the Council, on which we depend and benefit in abundance. So compliments to my Icelandic colleague are my final words in the beginning here from now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let's hear from Mira Kleist from Greenland.
Do you hear me? I'm sorry about the technical issues. I guess this can serve as a reminder of improving infrastructure in the Arctic. But thank you for having me anyways. It's a pleasure to be here with colleagues and being able to provide a Greenlandic perspective. As my Faroese colleague Margretha mentioned, we are currently in the process of negotiating a possible new Arctic strategy for the Kingdom of Denmark. As mentioned, it is in process, so it's of course limited how much we can go into detail with it. But it has 6 main visions so far, as Margretha mentions, and it goes across many of the important issues that have been mentioned throughout the event today as well. But maybe just as Margretha mentioned as well, it's worthwhile remembering that compared to many other states, the Kingdom of Denmark consists of 3 different countries with distinctive living conditions and priorities, and this will be reflected in such a strategy. In terms of content, there's a strong priority from the government of Greenland to prioritize the people of the Arctic. Decisions made for and in the Arctic should be based on the needs and priorities of the peoples. And there's a clear focus on addressing the need for sustainable development in balance with the environmental protection. Or as my Icelandic colleague mentioned, balance ecology with economy. And the aim is here, as was also mentioned throughout the session earlier, that it's developing the North for the North. This increased focus would be an improvement from our perspective to a new Arctic strategy for the Kingdom of Denmark. In general, the strategy would also reflect the developments that have happened during the past 10 years, such as the change in climate and the increased focus on the Arctic. This increased attention should be well managed and again on the conditions of the people of the Arctic through international cooperation. The government of Greenland remains supportive of and open to bilateral, regional, and multilateral cooperation in the Arctic. This includes the close cooperation we already have with the European Union, which is mainly on fisheries, on education, and as an overseas countries and territory to the European Union. Currently, the Overseas Association Decision and the Greenland Decision are being merged, and we hope that this will not change the positive cooperation we have so far with the European Union. This also includes a support to the education sector of Greenland, which is very valuable to the development of Greenland and the Arctic in general. The government of Greenland is also currently negotiating with the European Commission for a possible new fisheries partnership agreement, and we hope to be able to update the joint declaration between the European Union, Greenland, and Denmark. The declaration ties the spirit of this very broad cooperation, and we hope to reflect the changes and many developments that have happened in the region recently. And also, Adam, in your questions, you relate also to the COVID-19 pandemic and the development of these Arctic strategies in this setting. And we can confirm that for the Kingdom of Denmark and Greenland as well, this has greatly challenged the possibilities for consultations during this process. And it has made it clear that the remote Arctic societies are particularly vulnerable to such crises. This awareness has affected our perspectives on many things and stresses the need to continue developing the infrastructure of the Arctic. In terms of international cooperation, the Greenlandic authorities are already engaging in exchanging lessons learned and best practices within the Arctic Council and the Nordic Council of Ministers, and bilaterally, and we wish to continue and strengthen such valuable cooperation, partly through the new Arctic strategy of the Kingdom of Denmark. That being said, the main challenges relate to limited capacity in the healthcare system, which are mainly domestic challenges. Consequently, the majority of these challenges might not be addressed in the common Arctic strategy of the Kingdom as other domestically challenges.
Thank you very much. And let's kind of finish this round with Ambassador Winkler. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Adam, and thank you for the invitation to speak again at this kind of symposium, even if it is virtual, and would still be better if we were all together in the same room, but well, that's not going to happen right now. I mean, you have asked us, Adam, I mean, are there any new aspects compared to when we did our last strategy 10 years ago? And if you've heard it from Margretha and Mira already, of course there is. I would be a bit more, let's say, blunt or take the bull by the horns. And I mean, there is a new aspect which is called security policy. Military build-up, military tensions in the Arctic, and 2 points on this. One of them is that this, at least seen from Copenhagen, is a result of geopolitical tensions. It's not about the Arctic, even if there's a lot of talk about it in the Arctic. My second point is, and I think, and I know that many will nod to this in this, is that when you read the press and so on, you get the impression that all we talk about in the Arctic is security policy. But the Arctic is so much more. And I think that's a really, really important, let's say, joint message to get out there, that it's not all about security policy and military issues. I think Friðrik described it very well, that what I like to call the cooperative Arctic is alive and kicking. And those who doubt it, I suggest you look into the SOW marine mechanism, which Friðrik was also referring to see how this cooperation is playing out in real life. So yes, there are new aspects, but if I paraphrase a bit over what Margretha and Mira and others have said today, the old challenges and opportunities, they are still there, and we have to be careful that we don't forget that when talking about new aspects or new challenges. We still have to work for sustainable economic development. We still have to work with the environment and so on in the Arctic to the benefit of the people living in the Arctic. I am slightly concerned, I have to say, that these, let's say, agendas who are still there and has been with us for a long time, that they are, if not forgotten, then put in second place to other agendas which are, let's say, more sexy to write about in the press. So that is why, as you have already heard from Margretha and Mira, this is why, to a large extent, the upcoming new Arctic strategy of the Kingdom of Denmark, which we are negotiating and drafting at the moment, will to a large extent focus on challenges, let's say, well known. Of course, a lot have happened also in other areas in the past 10 years. And for that reason, there will also be new aspects, new ideas, new visions, new actions to be taken. But the main challenges remain the same, and this will be reflected in the strategy. I think for those who are connoisseurs of the current Arctic strategy of the Kingdom, you will note in the new one, at least that's the ambition, that it would be more directed to the international cooperation, as Mira also mentioned, and perhaps less looking into the inner working of the kingdom. Always, what I've said is also what's driving my focus as a SOW in the Arctic Council and the work we're doing there. And I must say, I mean, I have only been in my position for 1.5 years, but I will subscribe to what Friðrik said, that this is really a cooperation that is developing positive. Sure, much more is needed. We do need more, perhaps specific actions. We do need a clearer and better communication from the Arctic Council, but there is a lot going on, and I myself has been very positively surprised by all the specific activities taking place in a fora where we have the 8 Arctic states, the 6 permanent participants, and a huge group of observers who are also contributing to bringing the developments in the Arctic forward in a positive way. And then just to link it back, to finish to what I started with, I do believe that sort of cooperation and dialogue with the Arctic Council as the main and prime example is a very, very important element in, if not solving the tensions that we see in security policy and military, because as I said, this is a geopolitical issue, but at least addressing and strengthening the trust between the Arctic state, and in this way contributing to addressing the tension that we do also see. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would maybe have two questions, one from me and one from which is kind of coming partly from the last panel, but I think it's interesting to ask it here. The question was about the opportunities for well-educated people in the Arctic, how to attract well-educated people to the Arctic communities, and how to keep those from Arctic communities who acquire higher education to stay or to come back home. So I think that was, I'm a bit paraphrasing, but what do you see as a kind of part of this Arctic strategies as contributing to that goal? The other aspect is that I think everybody in these last two panels mentioned this balance between production and protection, ecology and economy, finding the sustainable balance. And my question would be: do you see, as we had sustainable development goals adopted, and we also see trends in in some corners that we have investors who don't want to come to the Arctic because it's the question, it's for the reputational problem, and we see also the leaders of big European countries saying that the companies should avoid engaging in Arctic shipping. Do you see this balance between ecology, economy, protection, and preservation somehow changing, somehow shifting over the last 10 years, and how that affects the priorities? I don't see hands, so
I put up my hand physically, not virtually. But just to thank you for the questions, Adam, and I definitely do think I'll just address the first question to start with. I don't know if you wanted us to address both, but in terms of opportunities for getting well-educated people to get educated in the Arctic and get them back when they get an education outside the Arctic. I myself also had to take a university degree outside of Greenland. And what has been a discussion here and continues to be a discussion here is first of all, the need for the continued support from our international partners. And here earlier I mentioned the European Union that have been a great support for the education sector. Our partnership agreement has focused on education based on a joint agreement and a continued focus on the government of Greenland. We have developed and continue to develop our own university here in Greenland, and that has shown that a lot of people have increasingly wanted to take their university degree in Greenland, and that they stay in Greenland after their degree is taken. Of course, we know that there can be a lot of reasons to stay wherever you have taken your degree, depending on both job opportunity, but also personal relations that develop throughout. So a great opportunity for the Arctic, and here I speak for Greenland, of course, is to continue developing this possibility, and also the possibilities of getting a higher education in your own language. Currently, it is very difficult for a Greenlandic speaker to take a higher education completely in Greenlandic. Already in high school, it will be challenging for them to take an education. They would need to have a high proficiency in Danish. And we see that's a struggle for a lot of young people. So that's also a priority from our side. And how international cooperation can support this, as mentioned earlier, we are very happy that the European Union continues to support the government's focus on this. And also, we encourage international partners, such as researchers that come to the country, to increase their cooperation with local young people, local researchers, young researchers, and so on, to include them in their research projects or other projects to also continue to develop their skills, and also wanting them to be able to develop their skills within the country, not having to leave the country. So that's a couple of thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. And Friðrik raised his hand, but Thomas, do you want to make intervention right away to comment on what?
No, I can wait for Friðrik.
Okay. So let's take Friðrik's comment.
Just on your two questions, real quick, on the opportunities in terms of keeping people and getting people back, and even getting new people. It's actually an interesting question, because it really cuts sort of to the heart of the interaction between government policy and private investment. Because if you want people to come back, they have to have opportunities, and for you to have opportunities, and if you want to have investment interest in the region, you need some basics, which primarily will be provided by the government. You need the infrastructure, you need roads, airports, but you need also hospitals and schools, and you need basic government services, again, education, health, etc. And that creates the basis for a functional society. And that is for anyone who moves away from these areas, to the big cities or the bigger countries to get education. If you want to go back, well, you know what? Especially once you start having your own family, etc., you want to be able to provide those opportunities to your kids. And if we don't have that in these areas, at least to the at bare minimum acceptable level, then that's always going to be a challenge. So, but with that investment, yes, that costs money, but that's going to bring in then the follow-on investment, the private investment, and you should hopefully have a positive feedback loops. But sometimes we get stuck in the the initial cost of investment, and we have a hard time moving beyond it. So that's what I would just want to comment on the first question. But that links then to the second on the balance challenge, if you will, and. The thing is, many of us already here in the Arctic, I think we at the risk of sounding a little bit, full of myself, but we have shown that there is a way to do that. I think we pride ourselves in Iceland that and I know with my colleagues, to the east and west, that we've been able to manage to run a sustainable fisheries policy that brings in the wealth from the ocean and turns it into a wealth for the nation, but without depleting the resources in such a way as to cause damage for the future. Because we're utilizing the resources in a way that leaves them also healthy for future generations. Now there is a bit of a challenge, because you brought it up, Adam, and then there are these sort of misunderstandings about what is sustainable and what isn't sustainable. And I'll just use the example of an easy example here, which is the eider duck in Iceland, right? We collect eider down from the eider duck, which is just a perfect symbiotic relationship between man and nature. Is that the farmers, the eider farmer, collect the eider down from the eider duck nests once the ducklings have left the nests, and they're economically incentivized to make sure that there is not too much, the foxes don't come and kill them, etc., etc. But of course, the eider duck is listed as an endangered species. So every now and then we run into this challenge that in other countries, well-meaning people want to ban the importation of eider down because, it's a product from endangered species, not realizing that this is precisely the symbiotic, ecological, balanced situation where you have the economy and the ecology working hand in hand for the benefit of both. And I'm sure my friends over in Greenland or the Faroe Islands could tell you similar stories. But this is just an ongoing challenge. Is it better for us to start, for example, not utilize the sailing routes across the Northwest or the Northeast Passage once they open up. I mean, if you're shortening the trip of a ship coming from Asia to Europe by a week in terms of using less fuel, etc., I mean, we really need to study the full impact and just sometimes not run just out of sort of the headline things in this. We need to study the full impact. What is beneficial? How do we make it work? How does it benefit both the sort of us, the humans, and preferably benefit nature as well. But I think sure we can strike this balance. We've done that with fisheries, and we can do that elsewhere. And if we don't do it, then I worry that we might in fact lose more than we gain, because sometimes the economic interest can be so strong that if we don't find the balance, it will be ecology might tend to lose out. So very quickly, those were my points on those two questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and Thomas, please.
Yeah, I find the hand bottom as well. So I'm very proud of myself as Friðrik. I think on the first question, I would much support what Mira said, and I think we also have to face that many communities in the Arctic are relatively small communities, and therefore you need this cooperation. I mean, the U-Arctic is another example of how universities in the Arctic cooperate. I think it's also important, perhaps, to communicate that working in the Arctic, getting education in the Arctic is so much more than drilling holes to get ice core samples. I mean, there is a tendency to underdo, so to speak, the humanitarian sciences, and I think we have to remember that. I think we should build out just also across the Arctic on the exchange programs, not only of students but also of professionals. As Mira knows, we do have exchange programs between the Danish and the Greenlandic foreign services, and I think that is one way of doing it. But of course, you can also do it much more in the Arctic. And Adam, to provoke you a little bit back, I mean, how do you get people there? Well, you make it interesting. Luckily, the development in the Arctic is sort of providing this by itself. But I think the fact that we are now also working to establish a foreign security policy think tank or institute, whatever we call it in Nuuk, is also a way of sort of spreading out so it becomes more interesting to work in the Arctic. On your second question, well, I mean, to some extent, my answer is I don't know if the balance has shifted. We seem to have the same discussion back in Ilulissat in 2008. Perhaps you get a bit more, let's say, no, I have to be careful here, radical solutions like forbid shipping in the Arctic. Sure they are there, but I think the difficulties in striking the balance is the same. I don't see that it has changed sort of profoundly. And Friðrik, I really liked your example. I mean, I really think there's again, and I know people who have heard me in the Arctic Council, they get so tired of me saying that there's a lot of there's a communication challenge here. I mean, the ignorance in the world on what the Arctic is about and the people who are living there is enormous. So we really need to step our effort in explaining, like the example you did, to the rest of the world, what the Arctic is and how the living condition is. So again, to some extent, it's not only, but it is also a question of us communicating more offensively, more aggressively on what the Arctic is all about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if Margretha wanted to still comment. And if not, Mira, did you still? Yes?
Yeah. Hi. Just very briefly, in relation to the first question, we also here in the Faroe Islands experienced a time which we call the brain drain time, when people were moving from the Faroe Islands and southwards after for educational purposes. it was indeed a problem to retain people here in the Faroe Islands. But we addressed the issues seriously and made a plan, and which has proven to be very successful. It is not really considered a big problem, and perhaps, as Friðrik also said, it entails that you do make the place an attractable place to be in and to live in. And with that goes that you need basic services. People want to live comfortable lives, etc. So all the basic amenities have to be in place in order to address that challenge properly with success. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if Tonya wanted to ask a question, or because she raised her hand earlier. And Mira, did you still have a comment? I'm sorry.
Yes. Sorry
Yes.
for taking more time. I just wanted to address the second question quickly, and thank you from the comments from colleagues. I do agree on many of the perspectives here, and also maybe as an example, I know this has been mentioned a lot of times in the EU settings, but I think it serves as a good example, which is the ban of all import and trade of seal and seal-related products in the European Union, which also damaged the economy of a lot of indigenous communities in the Arctic, and also is related to this issue of communication that Thomas mentioned, that we need to better communicate and understand how sustainable living in the Arctic works. This is a circular economy when you live off the things and the resources in your area rather than importing everything that you consume, which is unfortunately the situation in many Arctic communities right now. So providing a framework and support for the communities to be able to live such circular economies is also something that we could think more in. We are trying to do our part in communicating this. And also, of course, I want to mention that currently the government of Greenland is focusing a lot on hydropower. 70% of the electricity in Greenland is based on hydropower plants, and we intend to further develop these. And I think maybe one change or improvement, and I might be naive, but I think that there's a higher focus on developing these technologies, green technologies. And also in some small communities here in Greenland, they're testing solar energy and so on. And I think in an international setting on international cooperation, that would be a good way to go to see how, because we in Greenland do not have the capacity to develop a lot of technology because of the few people that we are. We don't have this preferential competitive situation, but we do want to cooperate, and we also want to be a place where these green technologies can be tested. And that could also be a good idea. And I think there's a lot of positive cooperation already, and we have the Arctic Economic Council and the Arctic Council, which also supports these developments. I think that was it. And also just to mention that besides the foreign policy think tank that might be established in Nuuk soon, we also have some scientific cooperation, Arctic Scientific Cooperation Hub, that we see that the international scientists also should use more, and we invite everyone to cooperate with us.
Thank you. If other panelists don't have any further final comments, I think it's thank you, Mira. I think it's a very nice way to finish this panel, that Arctic expects from the rest of the world to support with technological development and sharing the best practices and best technologies, and maybe also using our smaller communities as testing ground for the most modern green technologies. Thank you so much for this panel. We will then in 10 minutes move to North American Arctic.